Sarah Williams always believed that fate had a peculiar way of changing our lives when we least expected it. At 32, a biologist dedicated to the study of river ecosystems, she found peace in the waters of the Riverside River, which lazily meandered through the Riverside Valley region in upstate New York. Her husband, Jack, a 35-year-old nature photographer, shared her passion for the environment, though he preferred to capture its beauty through the lens of his inseparable camera. On that Saturday morning, the sky was painted an intense blue, almost cloudless, promising a perfect day for the activity they loved so much, exploring the nooks of the river in their tandem kayak. It was a ritual they had maintained for 5 years, since they met during an environmental preservation project in the region. "The river is different today," Sarah commented, adjusting her orange life vest while observing the waters that flowed with more force than usual. The rains of the past few days had considerably increased the river's volume, creating small whirlpools in some stretches. Jack, finishing packing his photographic equipment in a waterproof bag, smiled at his wife. "All the more reason for us to be cautious. We can explore the calmer stretches." His tone of voice carried that serenity that Sarah so admired, one of the many qualities that made her fall in love with him. The couple began their journey under the watchful eye of Tom, the veteran instructor from the local canoeing club. "Stay alert to the river's signs," he warned, knowing the traps that seemingly calm waters could hide. Sarah and Jack nodded in agreement, paddling in perfect synchrony, the fruit of years of joint practice. As they progressed downstream, the landscape transformed. The urban banks gave way to denser vegetation, with century-old trees leaning over the waters, creating a natural tunnel of branches and leaves. The sound of the city was replaced by birdsong and the gentle murmur of the waters. Sarah was mentally photographing every detail for her next research report when a different noise caught her attention. Among the sound of the current and the birdsong, something seemed to stand out. Jack noticed it too, slowing the rhythm of his paddling. "Are you hearing that?" Sarah asked, leaning slightly forward in the kayak. The sound, still distant, was high-pitched and intermittent, almost like a cry. Her heart raced, a mixture of curiosity and apprehension taking over her thoughts. It was then that they spotted something unusual floating a few meters ahead. A navy blue travel bag, apparently new, swayed in the current, caught between some branches projecting from the bank. The sound became clearer as they approached, and now there was no doubt they were cries, several of them, coming from inside the bag. "Jack, we need to get there," exclaimed Sarah, her protective instinct speaking louder than prudence. Her husband, however, assessed the situation with experienced eyes. The current in that stretch was stronger, and the submerged branches posed a real risk to the kayak. "We'll have to be strategic," he replied, already calculating the best route. "If we go straight, the current might flip us. We need to go around that curve and use that sandbar as support." As they planned the rescue, another kayak appeared around the river bend. In it, Emily and Richard, a couple of doctors who frequently practiced canoeing on weekends, approached the situation. Fate once again seemed to have orchestrated that encounter perfectly. "Did you hear it too?" Emily shouted, her voice laden with concern. Sarah nodded affirmatively, and quickly the four canoeists began to devise a rescue plan. Time was crucial, and the cries coming from the bag seemed to grow weaker by the minute. What began as a quiet Saturday outing was about to transform into a rescue mission that would forever change Sarah and Jack's lives. The river, a silent witness to so many stories, prepared to reveal another of its mysteries, while the morning sun continued its journey across the sky, oblivious to the drama unfolding in its waters. The rescue operation demanded millimetric precision. Jack and Richard strategically positioned their kayaks, forming an angle that would allow Sarah and Emily to reach the bag without being swept away by the current. The sound of the puppies, increasingly feeble, accelerated the hearts of all four. "We'll need to anchor the kayaks," suggested Richard, taking a safety rope from his equipment. As an ER doctor, he was used to making quick decisions in emergency situations. "Jack, we can use that log as an anchor point." Sarah observed the navy blue bag dangerously swaying between the branches. Her years of river experience told her that the situation was more complex than it appeared. The current formed a treacherous whirlpool near the branches, and one false move could result in an accident. Emily, with her experience in pediatrics, couldn't contain her anguish. "The sounds are getting weaker. We need to act now." Her voice trembled, but her hands remained steady on the paddle. With the kayaks properly anchored, Sarah and Emily began their approach. Jack recorded everything with his waterproof camera, documenting each moment of that unusual operation. The icy water splashed on their faces, reminding them of the temperature that those little beings inside the bag must be facing. "Almost there," whispered Sarah, stretching as far as she could while Emily firmly held her waist. Sarah's fingers brushed the soaked fabric of the bag once, twice. On the third attempt, she managed to grab one of the handles. The next moment seemed to happen in slow motion. As she pulled the bag, the unexpected weight almost unbalanced the kayak. Richard quickly threw another rope, which Sarah skillfully grabbed, allowing them to pull the kayak back to a safer position. Finally, with the bag on board, Sarah opened the zipper with trembling fingers. 6 small puppies, who couldn't have been more than a few weeks old, were shivering with cold, huddled on top of each other. They were of different breeds, which made the situation even more intriguing. "We need to warm them up immediately," commanded Emily, already taking off her thermal jacket to wrap the puppies. "There's a veterinary clinic about 2 miles from here, near the canoeing club." Jack and Richard began paddling back, now with renewed urgency. Sarah held the puppies close to her body, trying to transmit heat to them, while Emily checked each one with her clinical eye. "How can someone do something like this?" Sarah questioned out loud, feeling a mixture of anger and compassion. One of the puppies, a small caramel-colored mutt, briefly opened its eyes, letting out a weak whimper that broke her heart. During the return, they met Tom, the instructor, who immediately activated his radio to alert the veterinary clinic about the emergency. News of the rescue began to spread along the riverbank, attracting curious and concerned looks from the club's regulars. "Dr. Michael is already waiting for you," Tom informed them when they reached the pier. "He's the best vet in the region, a specialist in emergency cases." The group quickly divided. Emily and Richard headed to the clinic with the puppies in their car, which was parked near the club, while Sarah and Jack took charge of storing the equipment and the mysterious blue bag, which might contain clues about those responsible for the act. While organizing everything, Sarah noticed something that had escaped during the rescue: a small embroidery on the side of the bag, partially erased by water, but still legible. "Enchanted Valley Inn," she read softly, exchanging a significant look with Jack. The sun was already high in the sky when they finally got into their car to follow to the clinic. What started as a rescue was turning into something bigger, a story that needed to be investigated. Sarah knew from her experience with nature that nothing happened by chance in the river. That encounter was destined to reveal much more than just an isolated case of abandonment. "We need to find out who's behind this," said Jack, starting the car. Sarah nodded, her mind already working on possible connections. The Enchanted Valley Inn would be just the beginning of an investigation that promised to reveal a much more complex plot than they could imagine. Dr. Michael Anderson's veterinary clinic was known throughout the region for its humanized care. When Sarah and Jack arrived, they found Emily and Richard in the reception, both still agitated by the morning's events. The aseptic and organized environment contrasted with the adventure they had experienced minutes before on the river. "The puppies are already being treated," Emily informed, nervously running her hands through her still damp hair. "Doctor, Michael said they arrived just in time. A few more minutes." Her voice failed, leaving the sentence incomplete. The receptionist, Mrs. Wilson, a lady in her 60s who had worked at the clinic since its opening, observed the group with interest. "In 15 years of working here, I've never seen anything like it," she commented, adjusting her colorful framed glasses. "But it's not the first time we've received animals rescued from the river." That information made Sarah raise her head abruptly. "What do you mean it's not the first time?" Before Mrs. Wilson could answer, Dr. Michael appeared in the hallway, his impeccable white coat contrasting with the worried expression on his face. "Can you follow me to my office?" he invited, gesturing to the group. "We need to talk about some important things." Dr. Michael's office was welcoming, with walls decorated with photos of animals and their happy owners. A bookshelf full of veterinary books occupied an entire wall, revealing his constant dedication to study and updating. "First, "I want to congratulate you on the rescue," he began, sitting behind his solid wood desk. "The 6 puppies are responding well to treatment. There are 3 females and 3 males, approximately 5 weeks old. The interesting thing is that they are from different litters." Jack, who had brought the blue bag found in the river, placed it on the veterinarian's desk. "We found this identification," he said, pointing to the Enchanted Valley Inn embroidery. "Can it help us in any way?" Dr. Michael adjusted his glasses, examining the embroidery carefully. His expression changed subtly, as if that information confirmed something he already suspected. "In the last 6 months, I've received other cases of animals rescued from the river. Not just puppies, but adults too. Always near the area where you were today." Sarah felt a shiver run down her spine. As a biologist, she knew nature's patterns well, and this was definitely not a coincidence. "Why didn't you report this before?" "I made several reports," replied the veterinarian, opening a drawer and removing a thick folder. "But without concrete evidence or witnesses, the investigations didn't progress. Today, with you as witnesses and this bag as evidence, we finally have something concrete." Emily, who always kept her medical instinct alert, noticed something more in the veterinarian's expression. "There's something else, isn't there, Doctor?" Dr. Michael sighed deeply before continuing. "The Enchanted Valley Inn is close to an environmental preservation area. In recent months, rumors have emerged about an alleged clandestine kennel in the region. People report hearing barking at night, but when authorities show up, they never find anything." Richard, who had been silent until then, spoke up. "As an ER doctor, I've treated some employees from the inn. It always seemed like a normal, well-managed place to me." "Appearances can be deceiving," replied the veterinarian, leafing through some documents in his folder. "Look at this." He spread several photos of other rescued animals from the past few months on the desk, all found in the vicinity of the same stretch of river. Sarah examined the photos with her analytical researcher's eye. "There's a pattern here," she murmured, organizing the images by date and location. "All the rescues happened on days of heavy rain, when the river is fuller." "Exactly," confirmed Dr. Michael. "Whoever is doing this chooses specific days, when there are fewer people circulating in the region, and the river can carry the evidence far away." Jack, who had remained thoughtful, finally spoke. "What if we conducted our own investigation? Sarah knows every inch of that river. I have experience with surveillance photography, and we have 2 doctors who can support us." The veterinarian looked at the group with a mixture of hope and concern. "It would be risky, but with adequate support from the authorities, maybe it's our chance to end this once and for all." A cheerful bark from the hallway interrupted the conversation. Dr. Michael's assistant, Julia, appeared at the door with one of the rescued puppies in her arms, the small caramel-colored mutt that had caught Sarah's attention during the rescue. "He's much better already," Julia smiled, allowing the puppy to lick her face. "And it seems he's found his #1 fan." Sarah stood up instinctively, approaching the puppy that immediately extended its paw towards her. At that moment, something changed in her gaze. It was no longer just a matter of scientific investigation or justice. It was about protecting those who couldn't defend themselves. "When do we start?" she asked, without taking her eyes off the puppy. The group exchanged determined looks, knowing they were about to embark on a journey much bigger than a simple kayak rescue. The plan began to take shape the following morning, when Sarah and Jack met with Emily and Richard in a discreet cafe in the city center. The place, practically empty on that rainy Sunday, offered the privacy needed to discuss the next steps. "I got some information about the Enchanted Valley Inn," said Richard, sliding a tablet across the table. "It was bought 8 months ago by a company called Green Valley Investments. Before that, it belonged to a traditional family in the region, the Thompsons." Sarah studied the documents displayed on the screen while absent-mindedly stirring her cinnamon coffee. "Interesting. The start of the abandonment cases coincides approximately with the change of owners." Emily, who had spent the night researching animal protection groups in the region, added, "I discovered something else worrying. In recent months, there has been a significant increase in people looking for lost animals within a 30-mile radius of the inn." Jack, who always kept his camera nearby, showed some photos he had taken during the rescue. "Look at this." He pointed to an enlarged detail of the blue bag. "There's a partially visible serial code on the label. I managed to trace it. It's part of a batch sold exclusively to hotels and inns in the region. We need more concrete evidence, pondered Sarah, years of scientific research shaping her methodical thinking. I suggest we start by mapping the area. As a biologist, I can justify my presence in the region with a study on local fauna. Richard agreed, adding, Emily and I can help on weekends. As doctors, we have access to equipment that could be useful, like portable thermal cameras from the hospital. I already have an idea. Jack opened his laptop, showing a detailed map of the region. We can install trail cameras at strategic points. They're discreet, water-resistant, and motion-activated. As they discussed, Julia, doctor. Michael's assistant entered the cafe. It wasn't a coincidence. They had arranged her participation in the meeting. As a long-time resident of the region, her knowledge would be valuable. The former owner of the inn, Mrs. Thompson, still lives in town, Julia informed, joining the group. She didn't sell the property willingly. There were debts, and Green Valley offered a proposal she couldn't refuse. Sarah made quick notes in her field notebook. We need to talk to Mrs. Thompson. She must know every inch of that property. There's more, continued Julia, lowering her voice. My brother works at the City Hall in the Public Works Department. Green Valley requested several licenses for renovations in recent months, including underground constructions, supposedly for a new water system. Sarah and Jack exchanged significant looks. Underground constructions would explain why inspections never found anything suspicious. We need to be extremely cautious, warned Emily. If there really is an illegal operation, the people involved must have influence and resources. Richard took out his cell phone, showing a recent news article. The inn is organizing a weekend event for businessmen in the region. It would be a perfect opportunity for a closer investigation. I can offer to photograph the event, suggested Jack. I have experience with social events. It wouldn't raise suspicions. Sarah completed the thought. And I can accompany you as an assistant. That would give us freedom to move around the property. Julia rummaged in her bag, taking out an envelope. Dr. Michael asked me to give this to you. These are the test results of the rescued puppies. There's something intriguing. They all show the same pattern of vaccines and medications in their system, suggesting they came from the same place. The group spent the next 2 hours developing a detailed plan. They defined strategic monitoring points, established communication codes, and created a timeline for the investigation. We can't forget our main goal, Sarah reminded, her voice laden with determination. It's not just about discovering those responsible, but also about preventing more animals from suffering. When they left the cafe, the rain had given a truce, and a rainbow was forming on the horizon. It was as if nature was sending a sign of hope. The group said goodbye with the certainty that they had taken the first step in a journey that would require courage, intelligence, and above all, caution. Sarah and Jack, returning home, briefly stopped at the veterinary clinic to visit the rescued puppies. The small caramel-colored mutt, now stronger, greeted them with an enthusiastic tail wag. It was a living reminder of why they were risking themselves in that investigation. The weekend of the event at the Enchanted Valley Inn arrived faster than they expected. Sarah adjusted the collar of her black shirt, standard uniform for a photography assistant, while Jack checked his equipment for the third time. The van transporting them climbed the winding road leading to the property. The inn was an imposing colonial-style building, with meticulously maintained gardens and a privileged view of the valley. At first glance, nothing betrayed the suspicions they carried. Several luxury cars already occupied the parking lot, indicating that important guests had arrived. Remember, Jack whispered, adjusting his main camera, we need to look absolutely professional. You take care of the support equipment while I photograph the guests. Sarah nodded, carrying a bag with extra lenses and flashes. In fact, some of those pieces of equipment were specially modified, courtesy of a friend of Richard's who worked with technology. Small camouflaged cameras and discreetly installed motion sensors would record much more than smiles and toasts. Sandra Chen, the inn's new manager, came to greet them. She was an elegant woman, with Asian features and a perfectly rehearsed smile. Welcome. You can start in the main hall where the reception will be held. Later we'll have activities in the gardens. While Jack began his work photographing the arriving guests, Sarah carefully observed the staff. There was something mechanical about their movements, as if they were constantly being watched. Near the kitchen, she noticed a door with an electronic security system, unusual for a service area. "Excuse me," an elderly voice caught her attention. Sarah turned to find an elegant lady, whom she immediately recognized from the photos they had researched. "Mrs. Carmen Mendoza. Could you help me with this?" The former owner was holding a purse that had apparently torn. Sarah seized the opportunity. While helping the lady collect her belongings, Mrs. Mendoza whispered, "I know who you are. Julia told me. Meet me in the orchid garden in an hour." Sarah's heart raced, but she maintained her composure, only nodding discreetly. She returned to her activities, now even more attentive to the details around her. She noticed security cameras at strategic angles and staff who seemed more interested in surveillance than serving. Jack, between one photo and another, managed to capture images of the inn's more reserved areas. His professional eye identified suspicious details: recent tire marks on a supposedly abandoned trail, barred windows in service areas, constant movement of staff towards a restricted area at the back of the property. An hour later, as agreed, Sarah found a gap to head to the orchid garden, a more secluded space clearly neglected since the inn's sale. Mrs. Mendoza was already waiting for her, seated on a stone bench partially covered by vines. "My family took care of this inn for 3 generations, the lady began, her voice heavy with regret. "When I was forced to sell, I knew something was wrong. Green Valley wasn't interested in the hotel business. They wanted the location, the isolation." Sarah listened attentively, pretending to photograph the orchids. "Did you notice anything specific?" "The renovations started immediately after the sale. They built a new annex, supposedly to expand the leisure area. But the noises started soon after, especially at night." Mrs. Mendoza hesitated, looking around before continuing. "And there are the cellars. This inn always had underground wine cellars built by the Portuguese. But they expanded everything, created new tunnels." A noise of footsteps made the 2 women fall silent instantly. Sandra Chen appeared in the garden, her professional smile still in place. "Ah, here you are. Mrs. Mendoza, I didn't know you were coming. What a pleasant surprise." The forcedly cordial tone didn't fool anyone. Sarah sensed the tension in the air and quickly improvised. "I was photographing the orchids for the event catalogue. Mrs. Mendoza was kindly explaining to me about some rare species." Sandra nodded, but her eyes revealed distrust. "The main cocktail is about to begin. We need photos of all the guests." It was an order disguised as a request. When Sarah returned to the main hall, she noticed that Jack had managed to get closer to the restricted area, apparently photographing the gardens but actually recording important details of the structure. The event continued, with local businessmen and politicians chatting animatedly, completely oblivious to the true nature of that place. As the afternoon progressed, the pieces of the puzzle began to fit together. Every detail observed, every piece of information whispered by Mrs. Mendoza, every image captured by Jack, all pointed to something much bigger than they had initially imagined. The sun was beginning to set when Sarah noticed a crucial detail. At regular intervals, an unmarked white van entered and left the property through the service access, always with darkened windows. It was time to expand the investigation. In the week following the event, the group met at Dr. Michael's office to analyze the collected evidence. Jack's photos, methodically organized, revealed a disturbing pattern of movements at the inn. Sarah had mapped each entry and exit of the mysterious white van, while Anna and Richard contributed information obtained through their hospital contacts. "Look at this," Jack pointed out, enlarging an image on his laptop screen. "These marks on the ground near the new annex. They're characteristic of recent construction work, and look, there's a ventilation pattern that doesn't make sense for a common building." Sarah added, "Mrs. Mendoza passed me old plans of the inn. The original tunnels didn't reach that area. Something was expanded there, and significantly." "I got something interesting," interrupted Julia, entering the room with a folder. "My brother at the City Hall located the plans for the recent renovations. Officially, they're just expansions for the leisure area, but the construction material calculations don't add up. They ordered enough concrete for a much larger structure." Anna, who was analyzing the test results of the rescued puppies, made an important discovery. "All the puppies show the same vaccination pattern, but look, they're imported vaccines from a specific laboratory." I managed to trace it. Only 3 clinics in the region are authorized to use this type of vaccine. And one of those clinics, Dr. Michael completed, belongs to the same business group as Green Valley Investments. Richard, who maintained contact with some emergency room staff who were his patients, shared 3 former inn employees sought treatment in recent months with the same pattern of symptoms. Respiratory problems consistent with prolonged exposure to poorly ventilated underground environments. Sarah felt a chill as she connected the dots. They're using the old tunnels and the new constructions for something much bigger than we imagined. The white van, the night deliveries, the barking. We need concrete evidence, Jack pondered. Photos and testimonies are important, but we need to catch something in progress. That's when Julia, who had been quiet for a few minutes, spoke up. I might have a solution. My cousin works with outsourced cleaning services and got a job at the inn. She starts next week. The group spent the next few hours developing a meticulous plan. Sarah would use her knowledge of the river and the region to map possible escape routes and surveillance points. Jack would prepare more sophisticated monitoring equipment. Anna and Richard would organize a veterinary medical support team for any emergencies. There's one more thing, added Dr. Michael, opening a drawer in his file cabinet. I received an interesting visit yesterday. A former inn employee who worked there before the sale. She kept a diary with notes about suspicious changes that began even before the sale was completed. The diary revealed that Green Valley had begun making discreet modifications to the property months before the official purchase, taking advantage of the Mendoza's financial difficulties. Small renovations here and there, always in less visible areas, preparing the ground for something bigger. We need to act soon, Sarah urged. Each day that passes is another day of possible suffering for these animals. The group decided that the main operation would happen in 2 weeks, enough time for Julia's cousin to familiarize herself with the inn's routine and map out the most vulnerable times. Jack would install surveillance cameras at strategic points along the river, using his supposed photographic research of local fauna as cover. As they finalized the preparations, a familiar bark echoed through the clinic's corridor. The small caramel mutt, now recovered and stronger, came running into the room, followed by 2 other rescued puppies. Their presence was a living reminder of the reason for all this mobilization. Sarah knelt down to pet the puppies, her gaze meeting Jack's. They didn't need words to express their determination. The next step would be decisive, and there was no room for errors. The truth about the Enchanted Valley Inn was about to come to light, and with it, the hope of ending a scheme that had remained in the shadows for far too long. The crescent moon partially illuminated the valley as the operation began. After 2 weeks of meticulous preparation, each member of the group was in position. Sarah and Jack occupied a strategic observation point near the river, camouflaged by dense vegetation. Anna and Richard waited in a van equipped with medical equipment, discreetly parked on a secondary road. Position 1 confirmed, Sarah whispered into the radio communicator, observing through night vision equipment. Julia's cousin, whom they had nicknamed Informant, had confirmed that on Tuesdays after 11 p.m., the most movement occurred in the tunnels. Jack was adjusting his special camera with an infrared sensor when the familiar white van appeared on the dirt road leading to the back of the inn. Movement at the south entrance, he alerted, beginning to record everything. Through the previously installed cameras, they could observe an unusual pattern of movement. Employees who never appeared during the day emerged from the shadows, coordinating an operation that seemed well rehearsed. The informant had managed to plant small microphones at strategic points, allowing the group to capture fragments of conversations. "Special shipment today," said a male voice. "The Chinese buyer is waiting for confirmation." Sarah felt her heart race. Suspicions about an international scheme were beginning to be confirmed. Jack continued photographing methodically, recording faces, license plates, times. Every detail could be crucial. That's when something unexpected happened. One of the new employees, apparently uninformed about the procedures, opened the wrong door of the annex. For a few seconds before anyone could prevent it, the sound of dozens of barks filled the night air. "My God," Sarah murmured, adjusting her night vision equipment. Through a crack in the building, it was possible to see rows of improvised kennels. There are many more than we imagined. Jack was transmitting the images in real time to a secure server. "I'm seeing at least 3 different levels of underground construction," he observed, using a special thermal camera. "The animal's body heat is creating a visible pattern." The informant managed to get close enough to capture more details of the conversation: transport plans, distribution routes, negotiated values. Each recorded word was an additional piece in the puzzle they had been assembling. Anna and Richard, monitoring everything from the van, maintained contact with an animal rescue team on standby. "We have 3 clinics prepared to receive emergencies," Anna confirmed, "and Dr. Michael is coordinating a network of temporary homes." The operation continued for 2 more hours, documenting every movement, every conversation, every piece of evidence of the scheme. Sarah observed everything with a mixture of horror and determination. The plan was to collect enough evidence to ensure that when the authorities intervened, there would be no way to escape. That's when they noticed a different movement. Sandra Chen arrived in her imported car, accompanied by 2 men in business suits. "It's them," the informant whispered over the radio, "the true owners of the operation." Jack managed to capture clear images of the 3 talking, gesturing towards the tunnels, clearly discussing business details. Sarah activated the high-precision recorder, capturing revealing fragments of the conversation. "The lab in China is satisfied with the latest specimens," said one of the executives. "They want to triple the order for next month." The scale of the operation was beginning to reveal itself. It wasn't just a case of animal abandonment. It was an international trafficking network, using the inn's tunnels as an operations center for something much bigger. Sarah felt a drop of cold sweat run down her forehead. The evidence they were collecting was much more serious than they had initially imagined. Jack continued photographing methodically, his hands steady despite the tension of the moment. "I think we have enough," he murmured after a few more minutes. "We need to leave before—" A sharp bark cut through the air, followed by others. Something had agitated the animals in the tunnels. Sandra Chen and the executive stopped their conversation, alert. For a moment, time seemed to freeze. Sarah and Jack exchanged tense looks. The night was not over yet, and the most impactful revelations were about to emerge from the shadows of the Enchanted Valley Inn. The bark that cut through the night's silence was like the spark that ignited a chain reaction. Sandra Chen and the executives quickly headed towards the interior of the annex, while employees ran in all directions, in a desperate attempt to contain whatever was happening in the subterranean levels. Sarah and Jack remained motionless, their hearts racing. Every second was crucial. Every image captured could be the definitive proof they needed. The informant had positioned herself strategically near an emergency exit, ready to provide more details. "They're trying to transfer the animals to another location," the informant whispered through the communicator. "I heard something about a contingency plan." Jack adjusted his camera, focusing on the frantic movement around the annex. "Sarah, look there." He pointed to a small side door that opened. An employee came out carrying a metal briefcase, nervously looking around before heading to a vehicle parked in the shadows. Sarah quickly contacted Anna and Richard. "Get ready. I think we'll have to act sooner than we planned." Meanwhile, inside the tunnels, chaos was unfolding. The barking intensified, echoing through the underground structure. The informant managed to get close enough to capture fragments of alarmed conversations. "The sedatives aren't working," someone shouted. "We need to evacuate them now." It was at this moment that Sarah made a risky decision. "Jack, I'm going to get closer. We need to see what's happening in there." "It's too dangerous," Jack protested, but he already knew he couldn't dissuade her. With years of experience in trails and explorations, Sarah moved silently through the vegetation, approaching the annex. Through a low window, she managed to glimpse the interior. What she saw made her stomach churn. Dozens of dogs of various breeds and sizes were in makeshift compartments. Some seemed drugged, others barked incessantly. Employees ran from side to side, trying to control the situation. Sarah activated her communicator. "Anna, Richard, prepare the rescue team. We have an emergency here." At that exact moment, sirens began to sound in the distance. Someone had alerted the authorities. Sandra Chen and the executives, realizing the situation was out of control, ran to their cars. "Now, Jack!" Sarah shouted. He immediately activated a device that electronically blocked the inn's gates, preventing the escape of the main suspects. The next few hours were a whirlwind of actions. Police officers, environmental agents, and the rescue team invaded the property. Sarah and Jack, along with Anna and Richard, coordinated the rescue of the animals, providing immediate medical care and documenting each piece of evidence found. Dawn brought with it the true extent of the criminal operation. More than 200 dogs were rescued, many of them rare breeds or with specific genetic modifications. Seized documents revealed an international animal trafficking network involving clandestine laboratories and buyers from various countries. Sandra Chen, the executives, and several employees were detained. The informant, whose identity was preserved, provided crucial testimonies that helped unravel the entire structure of the organization. Days later, at a press conference, Sarah, still visibly emotional, spoke to journalists. "What we discovered goes far beyond an isolated case of abandonment. It was a sophisticated operation of animal cruelty and international trafficking. But today, thanks to the joint effort of many brave people, we can say that these animals are safe." Jack, by her side, added, "The images and evidence we collected will be crucial to ensure that those responsible are properly punished. But our work doesn't end here. There are many animals that need homes and care." In the months that followed, the story of the Enchanted Valley Inn gained national and international repercussion. The case became a milestone in the fight against animal trafficking, inspiring changes in legislation and an increase in surveillance of remote areas. Sarah and Jack, now recognized as local heroes, decided to found an NGO dedicated to animal rescue and protection. Anna and Richard joined the cause, offering their medical knowledge to create a rehabilitation center for rescued animals. The small caramel mutt, which had been the first sign of this entire journey, was adopted by Sarah and Jack. They named him Brave, a constant reminder of the courage needed to face injustice. The Enchanted Valley Inn, once a symbol of dark secrets, was transformed into an animal sanctuary, a place of hope and recovery. The tunnels that once housed suffering were now used for animal behavior studies and educational programs. As the sun set over the valley, Sarah watched the rescued animals playing freely in the renewed gardens of the old inn. Brave, by her side, wagged his tail happily. She smiled, knowing that although there was still much work ahead, this was just the beginning of a new era of compassion and justice for animals. The end? Sarah thought. No, this is just the beginning of a much bigger story.